How you doing, everybody? Vasu, Vaddiparty, Casey Freelove here. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast for Monday, May 10th, 2021. Well, we've had a great Mother's Day with your moms. Let me just adjust Facebook here. A little slow here today on the uptake. Here we go. Live. Yep, there we go. All right, Vasu, Vaddiparty, Casey Freelove, Make the Money and Run podcast for May 10th. Hope you all had a great Mother's Day with your mothers, whoever you call mom. Hopefully it was a great day. Casey, how was your Mother's Day with your mom?
It was good. You know, the key to mom's heart is basically just showing up. That's my advice to anybody out there. You can buy them whatever you want, but if you just show up and spend a little time with them, I think they appreciate that most of all. And I think, both you and I are blessed to live near our parents and be able to, see our moms as often as we'd like. And that's a good thing. You got to appreciate the stuff. The person who gave you life, you got to give her some love, especially on Mother's Day.
Absolutely. I wonder what that's a joke for another time, but seriously, hope everybody had a good weekend. Lots of things to talk about baseball wise and NBA wise. Really shocking what happened in the NBA over the weekend, but we're here Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, 4:15 Eastern, 1:15 on Facebook Live, YouTube page live, and then anywhere you download, subscribe your podcast, Apple and Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeart, and Google Podcasts. Send us an email at mtmarpodcast@gmail.com, and you can hit us on every social media. Thanks to everybody on Facebook right now. Robbie's on Facebook, as always. Thanks, Robbie. There's a rain out in Denver. Yeah, we're going to get to that. Rockies and Padres are going to be postponed today, so that's one game off the board today. So let's get to it here as we get to the NBA. We'll start off with the We'll talk about the Dodgers a little later, Casey, but the NBA, Los Angeles is having a tough time this weekend. The Clippers and the Dodgers are both not doing very well. And here in the Bay Area, the Giants and A's are thriving, winning 2 of 3 of their series. Actually, the A's probably could have won yesterday, sweeping the Tampa Bay Rays, which is not easy to do. The Giants took 2 out of 3 for the Padres. It's hard to sweep the series. Giants continue to play well in the Bay Area. And the Warriors, Steph Curry going off again for huge numbers. I know it was Oklahoma City, but boy, Oklahoma City, nonetheless, Steph Curry, 24 points on Saturday night. That point spread was 13.5 on Saturday, which I took. I was a little leery about it because they're a 500 team. And then it got to be 25 at the half, and then it was like 35. And I said, if they don't cover 13.5, then I'm canceling the show on Monday.
Yeah, gave out that pick. That worked out pretty well for the Warriors, and they've got another tough test tonight, which I know we'll talk a little bit about. Now, when you opened the show by saying shocking weekend, I thought you were talking about the shock that Colin Sexton felt when he took an elbow to the nutsack from Luka Doncic in that Cavaliers-Mavs game. Luka's a bad boy, Vasu. I picture Luka wearing like a leather jacket with the pop-top collar off the court the way this guy's behaved. He's only one technical foul shy of being in a lot of trouble. Is this intimidation part of the game another reason why he's, becoming one of the greatest young players in the game? What do you make of Luka's season thus far? Because I think we've talked about as much as him going at it with players and referees as we have how well he's played on the court.
Well, it wasn't a big game to watch yesterday with Dallas and Cleveland, even though all the playoff implications are there. On Sunday evening, the Cavaliers got beat by the Mavericks again. He got ejected from that game for throwing the elbow into Colin Sexton, but I guess it was a flagrant foul. They didn't issue him a technical foul because he's one technical foul away from being suspended. I guess that's a different thing than actually getting a technical foul from a referee. But I thought an ejection counts as a technical foul, but I could be wrong. On that. But it's interesting to see. How about the New York Knicks yesterday? I know that everybody surprised them with the way they're playing, and I still think they're in the playoffs. I must be doing the math wrong on this. Actually, I'm not doing the math wrong. They should have an X by them in the playoff standings. I said this on Friday, unless they're doing it for the top 6 only. They're in 4th place, and they go into Los Angeles and beat the Clippers by 6 points or 8 points. I forget. 106-100 was the final score. 108-102, something like that. But the fact is, they covered 7.5, and they beat the Clippers, who I'm not sold on the Clippers. I said this 3 weeks ago. I'm just not sold on the Clippers. I would still take the Lakers with a healthy Anthony Davis and LeBron James over the Clippers, even though the Clippers bench is still there. But you can't lose. I mean, the Knicks are playing great. Let's face it. Nobody thought they'd be where they were. But you can't lose to the Knicks in prime time, on a primetime game, on an ESPN special, on Sunday, on Mother's Day, at home. Not only not cover 7.5, but lose the game outright by 6 to 8 points, Casey. I mean, it's just embarrassing. The Clippers are playing like this. And I just don't know what's going on with the Clippers. And I just don't feel like I even think Denver may be better than them. And Denver's injured. Denver's got a third of their roster on the injured list right now. And Nikola Jokic doing everything he can to keep his MVP race up. And also, they're standing in the Western Conference, Casey.
Yeah, the the Clippers, that's a bad loss. In fact, that's the Knicks' first win at that building, being the Staples Center, since we were much younger men. Last time they had a win there was November of 2010 against either team, the Lakers or the Clippers. LA did not shoot the three very well. We've talked about Julius Randle. Great game again out of him. Derrick Rose did what Derrick Rose has been doing lately. And I got to say this as a side note. I'm so very pleased just to see Derrick Rose playing night in and night out, considering the horrifying injuries this young man has endured. I remember when he came out of Memphis back in 2008, University of Memphis, very highly touted, had some great years to start his career, and then the injury bug jumped up, and I thought we were going to lose him, kind of like how, Yao Ming could never stay healthy after his first couple of breakout seasons. But having a veteran like that who understands game strategy, just being out there with the guys, we've talked about the Kentucky link as well, and the Clippers, as I mentioned, they're supposed to be the best three-point squad in the league. They just went 12 to 35. So that's a bad loss at home, 106 to 100. And right now, they find themselves in the three hole. But now we're starting to see separation, because I know you want to talk about the Western Conference as a whole. LA, as we sit today, 45 and 23, 5 games back of the number 1 seed. Phoenix has put some separation now at 48 and 20, just 2 games back of the Utah Jazz. And of course, the Jazz are still doing it with some injuries that they've been dealing with as well. So it's very interesting. It seems like if you're just looking on paper, if you're looking at the eye test, and also the teams that are the least injured and have had a chance to build the chemistry, we keep looking back to a team we talked about quite a bit on Friday, those Phoenix Suns. There's no reason to think this team doesn't believe they are going to go very far in the playoffs. And with injury questions around all these other glamour franchises, they're going to be one you definitely want to watch when the playoffs start.
What do you think about this, Casey? Last week I had Jim Cosmore on the show talking NBA playoffs, and he was talking about the New Orleans Pelicans 25th in three-point attempts per game, and it was a high number even then. It was like 31 attempts a game, and the Clippers shoot more than 50% of their field goal attempts from three. And so you got to figure that the three-point game is in there. I think possession by possession has got to go. Who's going to play defense as we get down to this last week, going into the playoffs next week? And who's going to take teams seriously? Because you can't lose to the Knicks at home. The Phoenix Suns, if you're a contender, the Lakers were without LeBron James last night again. But Anthony Davis goes off, and they beat the Suns at home. And I understand the Lakers at home, and they're a good team. They're not a bad team by any stretch, but you can't take nights off, and you can't take teams lightly. I didn't see the box score, but I assume everybody played for the Suns. They're trying to figure out this Utah Jazz situation with them. They're 2 games back now, as the Jazz have won 5 straight because Utah's doing the things it needs to do with or without Donovan Mitchell right there. They've got English shooting. Bogdanovic is shooting well. Gobert's playing great defense, and they're taking those possessions. And all credit goes to Quinn Snyder for not only the season starting and melting the relationship between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell from last year into this year. They've got the best record in the NBA, and now they're 2 games up on Phoenix going into this last week. And if Phoenix doesn't care about the 1 seed, they might find themselves playing the Warriors or Portland like that in the 7th seed come playoff round. And I'm not sure that if Lillard gets hot or Curry gets hot or any of those two combination of those 2 guys get hot, depending on who Phoenix plays. They might find themselves out after first round and then a good year all for naught, based on the fact that they cannot handle that 1 seed right now. So Utah, Phoenix, give me your thoughts on that a little bit as far as that goes.
Well, if you're trying to figure out how it's going to end up, I'm telling you right now, Utah will be the 1 seed. The road to the NBA Finals in the West goes through Salt Lake City. Good one tonight. Obviously, Golden State's desperate. They need to keep winning, get themselves maybe even up to that 8 seed to have an even better chance to get into the play-in round. But after that game, the Jazz have a day off. They go home, where they play very well against Portland. That's their last tough test of the season. And they end the year at OKC. And then right here in my hometown of Sacramento, those are definite wins. So I don't see any way Phoenix can catch them. Even by that last game, perhaps they'll have a chance to rest. I think the storyline basically is going to be, A, when does Donovan Mitchell come back? And B, how do you account for, making sure the ankle is going to be okay and limiting his minutes, realizing that you are going to need him to ramp up once you get into the playoffs. Now, you could probably win the first round with Mitchell not playing a lot, because they're a pretty talented team overall and they got a great coach. But if you're going to make a real deep run and have a chance to get to the Western Conference Finals, you're going to have to make sure that you're playing on all cylinders. Now for Phoenix, again, last night, I guess maybe a bit of an aberration, but they're a balanced team. They win. And you know what else matters, Vasu, is we're talking about seeding and where you're going to be. They've got a great road record. In fact, better than the Utah Jazz. Phoenix is 22-11 away from home, while Utah is 19-14. Now, I say that, and the Jazz are 31-4 in Salt Lake, where I just mentioned they're going to be for the duration of the playoffs. So they've got to be feeling very confident. But I asked you this on my radio show on Friday. We didn't have a chance to dig deep. Let me ask you here on the podcast. If I give you the Clippers and the Lakers against the field, which unit do you want? Do you want the LA teams or do you want the field to win the Western Conference?
Well, as a fan, I'd want the LA teams. I'd want the Lakers, but I think the field right now is as balanced as it's going to be. And I think Utah is really good if they get Mitchell back. You find it funny, though. I just think the field right now, because the Lakers haven't done anything to show me that they're going to win unless LeBron James comes back and Anthony Davis gets back to form where they were last year in the bubble. And granted, there was not a lot of defense being played in the bubble either. I just want to see who's going to play defense. And the Lakers have shown, if anything, if there was any indication last night, they played a little bit of defense against Phoenix. Not a lot of defense, but they did score 125, which is a total aberration for the Lakers this year. Let me ask you this from the standpoint of Donovan Mitchell. Everybody's criticized the Brooklyn Nets, and we'll get to the East in a second. Everybody's criticized the Brooklyn Nets about the trifecta there with James Harden and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And James Harden's going to be out with this strained ligament, whatever he's got going on. And yet everybody criticizes the Nets because of the way they went about putting their team together. And yet I have not heard one complaint about Donovan Mitchell. I mean, in all reality, we don't know if they're really resting him as they get towards the playoffs from the standpoint of that they could be doing the same thing with him as Harden, but he doesn't get criticized because, one, it's Utah, and two, a lot of people are against the Nets because of the way they put that team together. Your thoughts on that?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. Utah is an afterthought. No, unless you live in Utah, you're not a fan of the Jazz. They don't have fans across the country unless maybe a guy that played at your college ends up on their team. I just don't feel like they've got that fan base. Brooklyn has gone from an afterthought as well, especially when they were in New Jersey. But now you got that beautiful Barclays Center. You're the center of Hipster Town, USA over there in Brooklyn. You got a ton of eyes on you. The only reason the Nets aren't talked about even more in the national media is because the Knicks have had this just out of nowhere amazing season, propelling them into the 4 seed. Now, as far as Mitchell, I believe it was a tough injury. I mean, he was going against the Pacers. He tried to deflect a pass, and then he came down with his foot underneath Edmund Summer, and it looked like it hurt pretty bad. So I believe that he's hurt there. From what I'm reading, it's going to be probably another week before he's going to be reevaluated. And that's a report from Friday. Their season ends this coming Sunday in Sacramento. So I guess my theory about being able to ease him back in and give him a few minutes just goes right out the door. And I think if the Jazz are going to win the Western Conference or get to the Western Conference Finals, clearly you've got to have Donovan Mitchell playing on all cylinders. And I think you said something else that really explains why the Jazz are where they are. Quinn Snyder went out of his way to get these guys in a room. The coronavirus thing was not funny. It didn't play well. Rudy Gobert looked like a total moron. Donovan Mitchell was rightly pissed at him. That he said, look, guys, we're under contract. We've got a good young nucleus here. I know a little bit about coaching. Stick with me, and we will be a good team. Now, I think if you and I were talking heading into the season, we both probably would have said the Jazz are right around a 4 or a 5 seed. Wouldn't have had them at the very top. That, of course, is before we found out all these injuries with the Lakers and the Clippers and this and that. But if I'm a Jazz fan, I know I've got to have Donovan back in there if I'm going to have a chance to win. And if I'm a Phoenix fan, I'm feeling pretty good about my whole core nucleus. Throw away last night's game. They've definitely overachieved. Nobody's overachieved more than the Phoenix Suns and the New York Knicks this season, in my opinion.
Well, with Donovan Mitchell, he's not getting talked a lot about as an MVP candidate because everybody's talking about Embiid and Joker and Steph Curry. I added Chris Paul in last week because I thought he deserved it. But let me ask, I guess I didn't hear it. Maybe I missed the answer. You think it's possible the Jazz are doing the same thing that the Nets are with Mitchell as opposed to Harden? Nobody can prove it. And I'm sure James Harden is hurt as well, too. But I'm not saying I'm doubting anybody, but I got a kind of feeling that these games aren't as important and they want to make sure Mitchell gets healthy like the Nets are doing with Harden. And I think that because it's Utah, they don't get as much play. But I think it's a slight possibility that they're probably and James Harden got hurt. When he got hurt, it looked like it hurt too when he tweaked something, because those tweaks can stay for a long time, especially coming off a pandemic and only 70 days between the NBA Finals and training camp. going into it, and the compacted schedule of games that they had for these 72 games. Next Monday, the play-in tournament starts. So the end of the season will be on, I think, on Saturday or Sunday, and then it goes from the 18th to the 21st is the play-in tournament. All right, let's move on to the East. Vasu, Vaddiparty, Casey, Freelove here. Milwaukee Bucks, they weren't playing very well. They give up a lot of points, and then at home they win by 40 certain occasions, and they'll just throw up 140, 130 points. And rightly so. They're still in the top three, and they're still talked about a lot. They're 3.5 games back of the Philadelphia 76ers, but they're on a 5-game winning streak right now. 2 of them were against the Nets last week, so they showed that they could play the top teams. And with Giannis coming back to all-star form, Chris Middleton looks like he is. In fact, he's right there close again to that 50-40-90 mark, 50% field goal shooting, 40% three-point shooting, and 90% free throw percentage. That is kind of a high water mark for guys of his ilk like Kevin Durant and Steph Curry that do those 50, 40s, and 90s, because you can tell who those shooters are. Chris Middleton, very underrated for the Bucks, but he's definitely their second option in Milwaukee. 3.5 games back with the same number of losses in the loss column with the Nets right now. And the Sixers have won 8 in a row. And you know what the Sixers are doing? I said it earlier. Who's going to play defense? The Philadelphia 76ers are playing defense because they had tough games against New Orleans the other night, and then Denver was a tough game Detroit was a tough game on Saturday. It was a 10-point spread. They ended up covering by 14, and actually they were up by 15 or 16 against the Zion-less New Orleans Pelicans, and they ended up winning by 2 in that game. What about the 76ers defensively? Joel Embiid has missed a few games. That might hurt him in the MVP race. But right now, as we wind the last week of the season down, they're, would you say, 2.5 up on 2.5 up or 3 up on Brooklyn and 3.5 up on Milwaukee, right? Yeah, there you go. 3 up on Brooklyn, 3.5 on Milwaukee, but both have the same number of losses. So that means Milwaukee has one more game to make up, I believe, as I'm reading that right. So it's going to be an interesting race down the week. But what are your thoughts on the 76ers as they match up with Brooklyn? And don't forget about Milwaukee chugging their train down the number 1 seed aisle.
Well, you mentioned that little asterisk in that Milwaukee's got to play more games than the other teams. In fact, they're going to go back-to-back today and tomorrow. They're in San Antonio tonight. Then they travel back home to take on Orlando. If you're curious, folks at home, rest of the schedule has them at Indiana, home against a really red-hot Miami Heat team, and then at Chicago. As far as Philadelphia, Vasu just said it. They're already playing very hot basketball. They've got a game tomorrow at Indy. Then they go at Miami. And then they get to finish with 2 straight against Orlando at home. So that's got to have you feeling pretty good as far as wrapping up that number 1 seed. Brooklyn Nets look at Chicago, home against the Spurs, home against the Bulls again, and then versus Cleveland. So what I'm seeing is a lot of wins for these teams, and I don't think there's going to be enough room to kind of change where we're at. Now, it's not impossible to think that the Bucks could jump over the Nets. And I think if you are a Nets fan or a gambler who's going to be looking at betting on the Brooklyn Nets, Google James Harden by the hour, get on his social media, try and figure out if they're playing coy or if this guy's really going to be able to get out there and run with them. Because I think there's no one player in the Eastern Conference that makes such a big difference as to whether or not you're going to be confident betting on a team to go far. I still like the Sixers at plus 375 to win the East. I'm going to get $100 in on that this week with my buddy up in Reno, just so I can have a ticket I feel like is legit. And you've talked time and time again about these teams at the bottom of these conferences getting into playoff mode and kind of fighting hard to get there. Well, it's pretty good if you're at the top of the conference too, and you've won 8 games in a row. You've got a pretty winnable schedule the rest of the way. So in my mind, Philly is the number 1 choice, my pick basically to win the Eastern Conference as we sit here today. But having said that, if James Harden gets back in the mix, it's going to be a very difficult thing to do to beat Brooklyn 4 out of 7 games. So I think it's wide open. I don't think we can discount the Bucks either. And then as I throw it back to you here, the wild card team is the New York Knicks, the team that is easily playing the best defense of any team that's up there near the top, only allowing, 105 points per game. Let's check that against the others, Vasu. The Bucks are allowing 113.7. The Nets are allowing over 114. And then the Sixers are at 108. So this is going to be an excellent year of playoff basketball. And I can't tell you how excited I am. I hate injuries, but I also love intrigue. And I just feel like as a fan of this association, we just haven't had much of that in a long time. It was all Warriors for a while till the Raptors upended them in 2019. The bubble title, take it or leave it. I know the Lakers will take it, but this is going to be a fun, true test. And the other thing I like, we're finally going to have some fans' butts back in the stands. It seems like society's reopening in a lot of these markets. We'll have some actual noise during the games and not just the squeaky squeak of a sneaker.
Two separate things going on here in this last week of the season. First of all, there's too many teams in the playoffs. 20 teams getting in the playoffs is way too many to begin with. But as long as we're going to have the play-in tournament 7 to 10, look at those 11 seeds still. Toronto and Chicago still right there in the East a little bit. Washington winning, and they might hold on to that playoff spot. I don't think, if I read right, they're not going to have Bradley Beal tonight. We'll get to that when we get to the game lines in a second, but no Bradley Beal, 8-point underdog at Atlanta. The New Orleans Pelicans, Zion-less Pelicans right now. What a terrible injury and a terrible time for that to happen. They're 2 games back of San Antonio. San Antonio struggled the last few games. So the Pelicans are right there with 2 games back. I know the league, if Zion Williamson's healthy, I'm sure the league would want to get him in there. And I think Chicago's playing pretty well now that Zach LaVine's back. They had a big win yesterday as well. They beat Detroit by 12. Who did they beat yesterday? They beat somebody by 12 on Saturday. They beat the Pistons on Saturday by 12, covering a 4-point spread. I could be wrong on that, but I know they had a big win over the weekend, and they're keeping their hopes alive to get into the play-in tournament. So the Bulls, Raptors, and the Pelicans on the outside barely, just looking in on the West and East. What do you like about those 11 seeds, Casey? And you think they have a shot to get into the top 10?
Well, the NBA desperately wants Zion in the playoffs, so this timing is really catastrophic as far as, they were playing good basketball. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They've got a decent schedule this week that if they had him, they probably have a chance to win a few of those games and make that push. I mean, the Spurs don't overwhelm me in that 10 spot. They're 32-35. They're an okay team. They've got a great coach. It's probably part of the reason that they've gotten there. Another team that I thought would be playing a little bit better late was the 9 seed Grizzlies. They're just 5-5 in their last 10. And of course, all the intrigue in the West is right there in the 7 and the 8 spot, because LeBron was complaining about the play-in. And if the playoffs started today, that's exactly where the Lakers would find themselves. Another team that's wondering about a key injury to one of their stars. I'm already reading that he might not play tomorrow, and you'd like to get him in there for a game or two, probably before the playoffs begin, especially if you find yourselves in a one-and-done situation where it's like, look, all you need is another team to give you their best effort for 48 minutes, and you could just be done. That would be catastrophic for a defending champion to go out in a play-in round. Obviously, that'd be unprecedented as well. I think the East is pretty much going to stay as is. I know that I do like LaVine back, and the Bulls are looking better when they've got him there. The Raptors just kind of fell apart on us this year. They were a team I really liked, and I did bet on quite a bit early in the season, but things have not gone good for Nick Nurse and company. And then last point on this, Bradley Beal being out when the Wizards are playing really good basketball, 7-3 in their last 10, a team that really just kind of came from the ashes and finds themselves with the potential to play in. And also, in my opinion, not only play themselves in, but make some noise if they can get out of the play-in round and get up against the number 1 or 2 seed in the East. So I would hope that Washington is able to get in, and I'm a Russell Westbrook fan, so I'm a little biased there. Congratulations, Big Russ, on just triple-double madness all season long. We appreciate it as fans. But I'm not sure, Vasu, if I can make a case for anybody outside of Chicago. If Indiana finds a way to slip up this week, there is a lot of separation, though. Pacers are 31-36, while the Bulls are 29-39. So 3 games in the loss column with only 5 games left is going to be a very difficult task. Let me take a quick look here before I throw it back to you at the Lakers' schedule for the week, whether or not they have LeBron. They have, versus the Knicks tomorrow night. Well, there you go. There's a fun game. Against the Rockets Wednesday, give them a win there. Then their last 2 are on the road at Indiana and at New Orleans. So I think they have a chance to creep back up into that 6th spot, but Portland's a capable team as well. So this is a week. Look, if you've been watching basketball kind of casually, it's time to focus back in, because what happens this week will have a lot to say as far as what's going to happen the rest of the way.
Lakers lose to Portland on Friday night, beat Phoenix surprisingly on Sunday. Indiana fighting for their playoff lives. That's not going to be an easy game. And then I think you said the Pelicans as their last game of the year, and that's not going to be an easy game either, depending on how close they are and if Zion Williamson comes back. One other thing, let's get to the games here. As we said, Bradley Beal. Oh, let me do something we made a mistake on. I was thinking about this, and I said I wanted to correct it as we get to the play-in tournament. So the winner of the 7-8 game is automatically in the play-ins. The loser of the 7-8 will play the winner of 10, and then the winner will get the 8th seed. Makes sense, everybody? If you have any questions, send us comments.
No wonder LeBron didn't like it.
Just win your games, and you won't have to worry about it. That's the bottom line. Play wherever they tell you to play. All right, let's get to the games tonight. We mentioned Bradley Beal out. Atlanta -8, 237. Bradley Beal averages 30 points a game, 237 really on the total. Russell Westbrook has been great triple-double wise, but he doesn't shoot the ball well, and they don't have a lot of shooters. And Hachimura has been in and out of the lineup, and I know they've got other guys that can score, and their pace is very high, and so is Atlanta's pace. 8 points. I almost was going to take Washington, but then I remembered Bradley Beal, and I read he's out for tonight. I'm not going to take 8 points, even though that would be the play, without a 30-point scorer on the court tonight. Indiana 9 at Cleveland. They're working their way through, trying to make their way into that play-in tournament as well. Memphis has really struggled the last 2 weeks, and it's not a gimme versus New Orleans because I think everybody had Charlotte yesterday against the Pelicans. The Pelicans bit them a little bit against the Hornets, covering that spread last night. They're 9.5-point underdogs to Memphis. Milwaukee 7 at San Antonio. San Antonio struggled. We document that. This is going to be a very interesting game tonight between the Golden State Warriors and Utah Jazz. Utah 5-game winning streak. They lost the last time they played at Golden State, 225.5 the total, but Utah, rightly so, I believe, should be favored because they are the 1 seed on a 5-game winning streak. And then the Houston Rockets, we've documented their lament all year, 14.5 for a team that doesn't rebound very well in Portland. And if they go cold shooting, they still might cover 14.5 because Houston's so bad, Casey.
It's a decent slate, kind of a light slate for a Monday. And one other point, you said earlier about how they're going to play it out this weekend. I love what they're doing. On the Saturday window, all games are going to be played in the afternoon, all starting at the same time. That'll be the same case on Sunday, which will basically decide the playoffs. So no scoreboard watching is my point. Everybody's starting within the same time frame window. So you're going to have to play your best, especially if you're fighting your way to get in. That Washington line moved from Wizards getting 6 up to 8. Public is on it as far as the against the spread consensus, 54% of the cash on those Wiz at +8, but I can't do it without Bradley Beal in the lineup. And I definitely am a little surprised to see that the consensus is 62% of the cash in on that over 237.5. I mean, you need Bradley Beal to be part of that
30
equation,
points
guys.
Game.
He's scoring damn near 50 points. I mean, you need him to get that over 237. That's a game I wouldn't touch.
Yeah.
I have to maybe tease it down to the under. I can't go over 237. That's just way too high of a total for my blood. The New Orleans-Memphis matchup is intriguing because if Zion was there, this line would be way different. Memphis opened at 10. It's down to 9.5, so the public believes a little bit in the Pelicans. But don't forget, I'm looking at my odds board here. Memphis is the number 2 team in the league against the spread. They've covered at a 61.2% average for the entire season. So that's not necessarily one that I want to hop into, especially knowing that Zion's not there. And then the Utah Golden State game, as you mentioned, this one is a little weird too. It opened at 230.5. I guess realizing Mitchell's not going to play for sure, I'm now seeing the consensus of 225.5. So that's 5-point swing across the Las Vegas Valley. Utah, a 2-point favorite in the game. And the public is believing in Steph and company with 57% of them taking the +2. That's a great line there. That's a perfect line to keep me away from it because that seems like it's going to be a 2-point game either way. So there's a lot of ways you can play this week, folks. You've got to look at schedule, previous matchups against these teams, and of course the results of back-to-back nights because certain teams like Milwaukee have more games than the rest of the league. I think I do have a couple of plays that we'll get to a little bit later, 2 of them in the NBA. And, I'm looking at my sheet as of recent, and I've done pretty well. I was all about the over early in the season, but I've totally switched. My last 4 NBA plays, as far as totals, have gone under, and I've got another under when we finally get to our picks a little bit later today, because at some point, Vasu, defense has to show up.
At some point, Casey, at some point. I know. I don't, yeah. I'm silenced because of it, because every night I look for somebody to play defense. The Knicks are playing good defense because their pace is slow, not that they're playing great defense. And it's just going to be interesting to see how we do it. All right, that's going to wrap it up for the NBA side. We'll hit baseball in 30 seconds. Make the Money and Run podcast every Monday, Thursday, Friday, 4:15, 1:15 Pacific on Facebook Live and YouTube. Download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. I want to forward promote Joe Madden and Lisa Diaz and Cammie Parsons tonight on their Hustle and Grind show. They're going to do a tribute to Mike Davis tonight. There'll still be some wagering, and they'll still talk about it. Joe Madden became friends with Mike Davis, the former cornerback of the Oakland Raiders. He passed away 2 weeks ago. He wasn't feeling well, 65 years old, way too young for those of us that remember him from his Oakland Raiders days when we were younger. He is the one that intercepted Brian Sipe in the end zone in the 1980 AFC Championship game that sent the Raiders to the Super Bowl. and Tom Flores' first year as coach, and he passed away. He had been on Joe's show a lot, and they're going to do a special hour tribute to him, as well as talk about wagering and talk about hockey, probably a lot for the Canadian group up there. But a very special tribute, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on YouTube and Facebook and anywhere that you get Staples Media posts. All right, back in 30 seconds with a lot of baseball from the weekend. Forward preview some of the series this week. Vasu, Vaddiparty, Casey, Freelove, Charlie on assignment. Make the Money and Run podcast for Monday. Welcome back to the Make the Money and Run podcast. We're here every Monday, Thursday, and Friday, 4:15 Eastern, 1:15 Pacific. Thanks to everybody on Facebook Live and our YouTube page as well. If you miss any live broadcasts, especially our pick segment, download, subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The baseball lines are going at the bottom. Only 3 lines that I have right now, 1 postponement and 2 starting pitchers that haven't been named yet in the Miami game and the LA Angels Houston game. I think it's the Angels pitcher and the Arizona Diamondbacks pitcher that haven't been named yet. But let's talk a little Major League Baseball as we get going. How about Jacob Degrom? You think he already doesn't get enough run support, and now he leaves after 5 innings in the middle of the 6th inning, or before the 6th inning started yesterday in New York? He hurts himself on warm-ups and has to be pulled after 5 innings. I think he did get a win, though, yesterday, finally. Geez. But he hurts himself, and he leaves after 5 innings. And the Mets did win the game, so I believe he did that to win, and I think they did sweep the series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Philadelphia Phillies, I know they won 2 out of 3 against the Atlanta Braves, but boy, they're in trouble. I just don't like their bullpen. I don't like the look about them. Last night they had a win with their ace on the staff against Foster and Noah, their 4th or 5th starter for the Braves. Minus 105 pick him. Aaron Nola gives up 4 runs in the 1st inning. Highly unlikely that he does that anytime during the year, except for yesterday, except after I had a bet on the Phillies, of course. But the fact is that Aaron Nola is their best pitcher. Harper doesn't hit with runners on base. Real Muto hasn't hit at all. Reese Hoskins, they had runners on base, and they had chances to score more than the 1 run that they did yesterday. I don't know how much you watched of it yesterday, Casey, but it was just awful to watch the Phillies try and hit. And, I know it's hard to sweep a series on the road. I probably should have taken that into account, but you can't leave runners on base like the Philadelphia Phillies are doing right now.
Yeah, well, it's a problem. I mean, that whole NL East is a problem. It's a very average division record-wise, and it's kind of par for the course for all of Major League Baseball. I mean, the best division leader is 6 games above 500, which, I mean, I know we're still early, but it's still something to keep an eye on. I don't know. I mean, I told you on Friday jokingly that the Angels were going to win some games against the Dodgers, and that's exactly what they did. 2-1 the final yesterday there as Jared Walsh hit a 2-run double. Sure Albert Pujols was watching somewhere going, oh, I used to be that guy. But hopefully Pujols gets picked up, by the way. I've been reading a lot of some really stupid rumor mill stuff and some stuff that makes sense to me from an actual getting in the game and playing standpoint. I'd like to think that he gets to go out on his own terms. Padres picked up a big win in San Francisco, 11-1. Again, the NL West, 3 really good teams. We thought there were going to be 2 elite teams. Now we've got 3 really good teams that are fighting it out and finding a way to get things done. I feel like the Astros are starting to turn it around a little bit, beating a talented Toronto team 7-4 yesterday. Kyle Tucker with a big 3-run home run. And then the A's, my Oakland A's, fall to the Tampa Bay Rays. But how fun has this series been over the course of the year? They played 7 games. 6 of those games were decided by 2 runs or less. Tampa Bay with a 4-3 victory yesterday. But as an A's guy, very pleased with the way this team is playing. And also good news, if you're a fan out here on the West Coast looking to go to the ballpark, they are planning on doing what they're calling the grand reopening on July 2nd with a full fireworks show, releasing more seats to allow more fans to be in the lower bowl. This, of course, all coincides with Alameda County's COVID-19 rate going down to a lesser level to where we can all start getting together outdoors. So there's a lot of fun, buzz, excitement in the Bay Area between the A's and the San Francisco Giants and the rest of baseball. It's hard to figure on a day in and day out basis, Vasu. I tell you what, you start betting on a team, you want to ride him, you think they're going to win 3, 4, 5 in a row. Then they go out and lose to a team like the Marlins or the Pirates. I'm looking at you, Cubs, yesterday, a 6-5 loser against them. But fun early on in the year. And as you mentioned, today's card's a little more difficult just because of the timeline when we're recording. A lot of lines aren't on the board yet because we don't know who's going to pitch in this Astros Angels game for Houston. We don't know who's going to pitch for Arizona. That game doesn't have a line on the board either. I believe Robbie mentioned earlier that the San Francisco,
San Diego, Colorado.
San Diego and Colorado game has been postponed as well. And Monday or Wednesday is pretty much kind of a quote off day. So we've got a light slate on most of those days for everybody as well. I'm trying to see if anything jumps out at me today. I do have one baseball.
We'll get to the games in a second, but the Washington Nationals were playing well. Then they get walked off twice. Brad Hand walked the house on Saturday and Sunday. Yankees get walk-off wins. Milwaukee loses 2 of 3 over the weekend in Miami. They got a big win yesterday in extra innings. A good win. Brett Anderson came back. The Cubs win 2 out of 3. We talked about the loss yesterday. And the Cardinals are getting hot. All of a sudden, they're tied for the best record in Major League Baseball. They're one. Actually, I take that back. The best record in the National League. The Red Sox have 22 wins. The Cardinals have 21 wins, and they're winning 5 in a row. Next set of notes here is the White Sox sweep Kansas City. Kansas City now 8 losses in a row. Maybe they are what we thought they are in terms of their hot start. Houston gets 2 out of 3 versus Toronto. The Angels, who do have a pitcher today, and there is a line. We'll get to that when we get the lines in a second. Take 2 of 3 from the Dodgers. Dodgers had a chance to score more runs yesterday. They're just not hitting the ball right now. And the Rangers come in pretty hot right now. They're going to go into San Francisco after beating Seattle 2 out of 3 over the weekend. So a lot of things to digest there. But what about the White Sox? All of a sudden playing well, the cream rising to the top. Kansas City only 3.5 back in the division, but now they've lost 8 in a row. And then the Astros are starting to swing the bats a little bit. I watched a little bit of that Toronto game with Zach Greinke yesterday. I had the over 9 in that game. And the Astros bats started to get going. It was 7-0 after the 4th inning. Feeling pretty good. But I don't ever underestimate those Toronto bats now with all those young kids.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the White Sox schedule coming up. They've got a series against the Twins, then 4 against the Royals, who are struggling, as you mentioned. Then they'll go at Minnesota before they head out to the Bronx. And I think they're a team that we all thought should be the favorite in this division, and they're playing at a rate where that's definitely possible. I think Cleveland's going to, continue to hang in there. They got no hit on Saturday or Friday, and then they beat down the Reds 9-2 in the last game. So they're a decent club there. And man, we didn't even barely mention that, by the way. I gave you the under 8 in that Wade Miley no hitter on Friday.
You did. They got postponed yesterday. There were 2 games postponed yesterday, and that was one of them, Detroit, Minnesota, the other postponed game. Last set of notes here on the on baseball. The division races, you just mentioned it, 4 games in the AL East for the top 4, 3.5 in the AL Central, 3 top 3, all 5 in the AL West, 4.5 back, separated, 3.5 for all 5 in the NL East, 6 games from last place, Pittsburgh to St. Louis in the Central, and 5 back for 4 teams in the NL West, Boston, St. Louis, Oakland, and San Francisco, all 20-plus wins going into the year. I'm still surprised about Boston, St. Louis. St. Louis is always a good fundamental club. Oakland, off to a great start this year, even though they lost yesterday, and then San Francisco also lost yesterday. But they're getting good play here. The Bay Area is pretty excited about baseball right now. All right, let's get to the baseball lines. Let me give you the line since it's not up here on the Angels. I have it right here. Junior Guerra is going to be the starting pitcher for the Angels. It's an opener situation. It's going to be on ESPN tonight. Luis Garcia for the Astros. 164 for Luis Garcia and the Astros, minus 1.5 and plus 115. 9.5 is the over-under in that game. So Junior Guerra out of the bullpen. Luis Garcia as a part-time starter for the Astros as well. But that game back on the board. No Arizona, and I don't forget who they're playing, but no Arizona-Miami game. That's the end of a wraparound series, as is the Boston-Baltimore series. All right, let's look at the games. Mitch Keller has a 12 ERA in his career against Cincinnati. That's why Cincinnati's $1.50. Otherwise, Cincinnati's a terrible team. It could be a good day for Tyler Mahle in that game. 7.5, a light total on that game, in my opinion, but we'll see. And then Boston, a 137 favorite at Baltimore. They're on the verge of sweeping the Orioles on the road again. This is a wraparound series from Friday to today. Martin Perez, who doesn't have a win this year, but his teams are 3-1 in his starts against Jorge Lopez, who's pitched pretty well, but he can't get past the 5th inning. Alex Wood, who's pitched great for the 49ers. San Francisco Giants, 145, 7.5 the total. Kyle Gibson had the one bad start on opening day, but he's been great since giving up that 5 runs with nobody out and on opening day start. The last 4 starts for him have been great. San Diego, Colorado, we mentioned. LA, Houston, we have the line. Miami, Arizona betting lines not out yet, but the Houston line 164, Casey. What do you like in the Major League Baseball today?
Well, I liked the 7.5 you've got on the screen. I want that instead of the 7 I'm looking at. I know these change all the time while we're on here, but that seems like maybe that might be one to look at first 5 because Gibson and Wood are both pitching pretty well. Neither has a loss. Both have ERAs under 2.5. And the Rangers are playing a little bit better than I would have thought coming into the year. I mean, they're a game over 500 on the road. So don't think it's going to be just a cakewalk for the Giants, who definitely have been impressive. I mean, you can't deny that. They're 12-4 at home, 20-14. I don't think anybody shy of Giants fans really saw that coming when the season gets started. I think that Perez-Lopez game is going to be a game that has a lot of runs. And when I give you my picks here in a second, I'll tell you why. Angels, Astros, it's always hard to go with when the undecided guy gets in there. It's going to be a bullpen game. That's why there's such heavy juice on Houston at minus 164. And that total, if they're going to kind of continue how they've been playing as of late at 9.5, there's a reason why that's the highest total on the board. Expect some fireworks to fly down there in Houston, Texas. So Mondays are a light slate. Got some good games on tap, and hopefully those Padres and Rockies will be able to get a doubleheader in tomorrow and continue to kind of keep the schedule on track. Well, since we got to wrap up, Vasu, let me head over to my picks here, and I'll start in Major League Baseball, where I've got one play today, and just talked a little bit about it. Perez and Lopez, Red Sox, Orioles. I do like this one to go over 9. I also wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore avoids the sweep and ends up picking up the outright victory. I was reading all the statistics and all my analysts I do in the morning. The consensus, I think, is not with me, which makes me feel good. Oh, no, I'm wrong. The consensus is with me. 71% of people think it's going to go over along with me, so I'm still sticking with it. Give me the Red Sox and O's over 9. In the NBA, Bucks need to win. Know they can still get the 2 seed. The 2 seed is better than the 3 seed. I don't think the Spurs have much else they need to do to kind of get into the play-in tournament. I will lay the 7 on the road, even though I know it's a high number. Bucks minus 7 at the Spurs. Then, without Zion, with the way that Memphis has been playing defense efficiently, I've worked these unders with them a couple times in the last few weeks. I'm going to go Grizzlies, Pelicans, under 229.5, and I won't even be surprised if by the time that game tips off, that total's down around 228, 227.5, because everybody else has eyeballs like me, and if you just look at the recent trends, this seems like a good play there. So 3 plays for you. Had a good week last week. Let's hope we can keep it going, because our only goal here is to make that money and run the hell out of the sports book. That's
right. 4-0 last week for Casey. He's got his picks today. I've got, by the way, that Bucks game, the Pelicans game last night, they covered, stayed under by a point without Zion. 223 was the over, and it ended up at 222, so it was not a good overplay for me yesterday. I've got the Boston Red Sox. They're going to go for a 4-game sweep. Martin Perez, I said, has pitched well. He doesn't have an individual record, but they're 3-1 in his starts, and it looks good for them to take on a pitcher in Lopez that does not have good stuff after the 5th inning. That's when the Red Sox put up most of the runs in those middle innings. San Francisco Giants coming off the loss against the Padres. All you got to do is win series. Texas still not great, but it's minus 145 for Alex Wood, who has been great. And then in the NBA, Pelicans played a tough game against the Hornets yesterday. I like them at minus 9.5 tonight against New Orleans without Zion and without a defense, as we talked about. There is no defense in the NBA, and certainly the Pelicans have proved that there is no defense. Minus 9.5 because Memphis needs the game to start moving up into the standings. All right, Charlie on assignment. He's Casey Freelove. I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. Join us every Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Facebook Live, YouTube Live. If you miss any of the live broadcasts, don't forget to download, subscribe on Apple or Spotify or anywhere you get your podcast. Don't forget to tune in on Stables Media to Joe Madden, Lisa Diaz, and Cam Parsons tonight for Hustle and Grind, a special tribute to Mike Davis. We will see you Thursday. We'll post our picks during the week. For Casey Freelove, I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast for Monday, May 10th. Have a great afternoon. And as always, good luck. See you soon. Take care.